Welcome back to TechNet Radio. In today's episode, SharePoint Technical Product Manager Bill Baer interviews Joel Olson, Senior Product Manager and SharePoint Evangelist at Quest Software. Listen in as they discuss Office 365 and the cloud, what its benefits are versus on-prem only solutions, cloud sourcing, and what this all means for IT pros. Bill, the mic is yours.
Hello again, and welcome to another installment of SharePoint 2010 for the IT professional. I'm Bill Baer, a technical product manager here in the SharePoint product group in Redmond, Washington, and joining us today is Joel Olson of Quest Software, and we'll be talking about Office 365. So to get started, Joel, Office 365 is really starting to heat up. Is this something that IT should be paying attention to?
Oh, definitely. You know, this is probably going to hit a few people. They're going to be like, whoa, this isn't what BPOS was. You know, Microsoft has actually done quite a bit here, and this is something you've got to pay attention to.
Great, and I think, you know, that's one of the most important things is really differentiating what Office 365 is compared to what BPOS was. Along those lines, I heard you talk about cloud sourcing in the past. Can you tell me a little bit about what it is and how it applies in the world of Office 365?
Yeah. I think, you know, there's a lot of talk about cloud. Cloud itself has been kind of a lot of hype lately. You know, there's the Azure cloud, there's infrastructure hosting, and there's traditional hosting of SharePoint, and it's tough for people to look at SharePoint and say, well, what are you talking about when you talk about SharePoint in the cloud? Because it is in so many different contexts. And with what we had with 2007, with BPOS, there was the two flavors. We had the dedicated and we had the standard. So there's BPOS S and BPOS D. Mm-hmm. Now, just to kind of catch everybody up with what we had with 2007 it was really traditionally the dedicated was, hey, you can use your existing AD. There's kind of a one-way trust, and you can use your existing accounts. The 5,000 plus was kind of the sweet spot for D, and you would get a highly available farm, you'd get My Sites, you would get the kind of a big intranet portal and hosted team sites. And then with BPOS S, it was more about having a site collection, having a few users and some email, and you know, maybe a little bit more than that, but essentially it was collaboration based, and they were small team sites.
Well, that's important to know. So really, you know, as I think about it, and as a lot of people think about the cloud, particularly those that are sitting in organizations where the cloud seems to be that organization's future. So the impact really is going to be on the IT professionals and the developers within those organizations as they elect to move towards the cloud. So what should they be doing today to prepare for that, to ramp up for that, and really preserve what they do?
Yeah, you know, there's a few key things around this. One is SharePoint itself has changed. It's been designed to be a hosted platform, and essentially there is ways now of developing against SharePoint because we have sandbox solutions. That's the first thing. So developers definitely need to ramp up around developing their solutions, whether it's navigation, whether it's workflows, whether it's you know, building your web parts. You really need to understand that client object model, and you need to understand what you can do with Silverlight, WCF, and traditionally looking at fundamentally changing the way you look at developing for SharePoint, because both even on-premise you can use sandbox solutions, and the cloud we're going to see much more sandbox solutions. They'll be enabled by default in Office 365. And the IT guy, he's the one who really needs to look at the way look at his job even, you know, when you start saying, what is it that you do? Because if you're a SharePoint admin in a small environment or even medium environment, and your company's like, you know what, all this SharePoint infrastructure, why are we not moving this to the Microsoft cloud, you know, to Office 365? And when they make that move, it's going to be, hey, IT guy, now we've got somebody else who's doing administration for our servers. We've dial toned that stuff. Now what are you doing? And it's a look at, you've got to make a move in terms of what is your business value? What's your value add? because there is a new need, and that need is all these different site collections that are being hosted in this multi-tenant mode. That's the other new thing. They need somebody to administer those sites, manage the permissions. That doesn't change. But you do need somebody who's looking at things like security oversight, who's looking at compliance, and who's looking at usage reporting and kind of corralling a lot of this stuff. But as well, there's kind of this consulting need of how are we using these sites? You know, are we doing some extranet stuff? We still don't want to get these security boundaries mixed up with what we're doing. And it's very easy for this to go under the radar of IT as one department comes up and says, hey, we can get this for so cheap, we don't even need to talk to IT. So that's definitely going to be something you need to focus on, figure out.
Yeah, I think the word cloud has been, one of the things that I guess on-premise IT professionals have feared, and I see opportunities for them in many different cases because there's always going to be connectivity back into their data centers for any given reason, whether that's BCS or it's a claims model where the identity provider is hosted there. So it really kind of shifts their responsibilities and turns them, in my opinion, more towards infrastructure and away from the day-to-day administrative tasks that they were accustomed to, which, as you alluded to, was managing site permissions or perhaps, adding and removing users or doing activities like that, installing updates. Now it kind of shifts more towards infrastructure and what really surrounds the platform. So security is one of those perfect examples, how they think about that and how they approach identity and how they approach, connectivity back into their line of business applications that sit within their data center still. So I see some opportunities for those IT professionals to kind of change the way they look at SharePoint and look at it more holistically and less about the product itself anymore.
That's very key too. I mean, it's that hybrid is not going away. There's going to be, especially in your larger enterprises, there's going to be those line of business apps, and you're going to try to figure out what should be in the cloud, what should be Office 365, what should be on-premise, and the decisions you got to make are, what are those applications we want to build on top of SharePoint? And that's where you start saying, okay, application hosting is what we do on-premise. What we do in Office 365 is going to be more around our team sites, our My Sites. It's going to be more of those collaboration-based applications. And sure, you can build things, but it's going to be more of those sandbox solutions, not the line of business apps, not those business-critical things where you need the development team building and integrating with your apps.
Right. So thinking about that, what are really the major differences then between Office 365 and on-premise?
Yeah, I think that's a great one. I think first off, we didn't have My Sites in the EPOS. So that's the first one is you're going to be able to get My Sites. You have huge mailboxes, 25 gig mailboxes on Exchange. So that's definitely going to be a huge attraction for companies. I think as well the mobile support really opening up with iPhone and Windows Phone 7 and Android and so on is super exciting. The link where you get the presence and the video conferencing, I think all that stuff just really, really bulks up. But as well, talking specifically more on the SharePoint side, the sandbox solutions for development, which we talked about a little bit already, but also internet sites. We're talking about, right now in the beginning, we're talking about brochureware sites, so not your Energizer.com, but we are talking about, small, medium business, your .com site, running through your little brochureware type site, running on SharePoint with anonymous access. So that's new.
Yeah, that's really good. Beyond Office 365, really, let's think about Azure since we're talking about the cloud. Really, what about Azure? Where does it fit in, and how does it apply to this conversation, if it does at all?
So I think that Azure continues to be something that as Azure itself matures, developers are going to be able to look at utilizing it and leveraging it. In the beginning, it's not going to be as much. There are some scenarios. In fact, if you go to Steve Fox's, any of his presentations, he's usually got a pretty slick demo of things you can do today with it. But Azure is services, essentially. You know, it is access to, why not build your application in Azure and then use SharePoint, your web part or whatever, to be able to connect and to pull that data in. It's about using the client object model or being able to use a sandbox solution, but have your hosted infrastructure or your hosted application running in Azure, which then is doing a lot of the heavy lifting and doing a lot of the processing and being able to pull that data into your SharePoint web part or your workflow or your site.
Okay, that makes sense. So, you know, thinking about it, let's kind of work back and into the past, because really I want to try to understand how big this cloud thing really is. So, you know, as we go way back, even to the 60s, there was discussions, there was thesis, and there was kind of this idea of cloud computing, yet in a different form. So it was really telephony focused. And then when we got into the 90s, we really started to see kind of the ramp up around what we traditionally call today cloud computing. And I think, you know, me personally, having been at Compaq in the late 90s, our president or our CEO at the time had a vision for the company, which was everything to the internet. So it was this big vision of cloud computing. So cloud computing's really been around for a long time, you know, when we focus on it. So how big is it today? How much of this is real and how much of this is really the future, as opposed to, you know, hype or just being something that's of interest today that may fade away tomorrow?
That's a good one. I think when it comes to SharePoint, a company's got to decide, hey, we're gonna buy 5 servers or 6 servers so we can provide search, some team sites, a portal, and so on, just to be able to build up a site, just to be able to have the infrastructure to run SharePoint, plus the licensing for SQL, for SharePoint, and all this good stuff. And the team is then going to say, well, we got to all ramp up on SharePoints. They're all going to have to go to, you know, 5, 10K training to ramp up all the developers each and all the IT guys each. And then they've got to essentially become SharePoint experts. And that often is a dedicated team that needs to ramp up and learn SharePoint. Now, a lot of shops look at that and they say, man, that's a huge price tag for SharePoint. And they would look at this hosted offering. I think hosted is one way to kind of describe what we're doing in this space. It ends up being more cloud in terms of the direction of what Microsoft's really trying to do with it and the vision of what they're trying to convey here. So it's more than just, hey, I want to host a website. This is, we want to host IT. You know, we want somebody who's going to run our infrastructure for our Exchange, for our email, for our telephony, essentially, as we move down the road with video conferencing and voicemail and more of the presence and integration. And then you start saying, well, these IT teams have to keep up with what's going on in SharePoint in terms of patching and version upgrades and bringing in consultants to help us because this stuff is hard. And you compare those two price tags of, you know, 10, 20, $50 a seat, you know, depending on what suite you're looking at. And often it looks cheaper when you start piling all that stuff up and being able to spread it out month to month. That's the part where it really starts looking attractive, is I don't have to pay, you know, 50, 60 grand on my state-of-the-art SharePoint farm. I can spread this out, and Microsoft will give me 99.9% SLA, and they're going to provide bigger mailboxes. They're going to provide, you know, services we didn't have before, and for our new mobile devices and, you know, all this stuff, plus a little bit of extranet type of collaboration in terms of being able to share files with our partners. And man, anytime we start talking like that to our IT team, they freak out about security, and everything really slows down. So I think it's essentially looking at what you're doing today and what you're paying today, and looking at it, it's a paradigm shift a little bit. It's sure, you could host these things individually, but now we're looking at these things in packaged solution offerings. It's not crowdsourcing yet. It's not. This isn't Facebook, but it feels like something that has changed in terms of the paradigm, in terms of cloud sourcing. And I think that's the key term here. And the thing I'd want to talk about for a second is, if we start looking at cloud sourcing our IT in terms of these packaged offerings, this is traditionally what IT has been providing for us, is the dial tone for our phone. Well, now we're getting dial tone for email, and dial tone for SharePoint, and dial tone for Presence and live meeting type functionality with Lync, and voicemail and all this good stuff. It looks like we can get a lot of the traditional offering of what IT gives us for small, medium, and large, and it's getting more and more attractive, and so it's tough for us to ignore it.
No, that's a great response. So, my last question for you today would really be around what you think most organizations are adverse to when it comes to moving to the cloud, and kind of your rebuttal to those perceptions, if they are perceptions or if they are truths. What would be your rebuttal? So, one of the ones that you've brought up a couple times during the conversation is security, but I'm sure there's more beyond security that would make an organization question whether or not they should move to the cloud.